I think we need to be honest about it. Jalen Hurts is only good because he has amazing receivers. And the receivers are only good because they constantly get one-on-ones because Saquon's in the backfield. And Saquon's only good because they have an elite offensive line. And the offensive line's only good because they have Jeff Stoutland. And the entire offense is only good because they have a great defense that's constantly giving them good field position. And the defense is only good because they got Vic Fangio. And Vic Fangio is only good because he got out of the state of Florida. So if you really think about it, the best team in the NFL is actually bad. Wait.
You are on top of the world, Birds fans. Enjoy it. It is the best feeling an NFL fan can get, and it never really lasts as long as you want it to, unless you were a Patriots fan from the Brady era, but that's neither here or there. Right now, Philadelphia looks unassailable. Good owner, great GM, strong coaching staff, unbelievable roster. But life comes at you fast in the NFL. Can Philadelphia actually stay on top of the mountain? My question, Brett, is have the Eagles solved the parity era in the NFL?
In a way, yes, right? Because they just throw money at the problem and it works. But you need to have the entire organization behind this strategy for it to work. You know, you need to have a GM that's really good at drafting so that you can consistently replenish the talent pool with young, cheap contributors and or stars. Like, this was the best defense in the NFL last year by a lot of metrics, and they're also 30th in payroll. Like, you can't do that without a GM that's really good at drafting. You need an owner that is committed to putting up a bunch of upfront cash so that the stars that you do have, you can retain on relatively manageable deals when it comes to cap management. You need a coaching staff that understands what their players are good at and doesn't try, to fit square pegs into round holes. Like, if you are clearly showing a weakness in the first month of a season, you need to be able to pivot and lean into what your strengths are. We saw the Eagles do that last year. Started out kind of shaky, and then they flipped their identity, part of the way into the year, and they basically rolled for the next 4 months. So again, it's an entire organizational commitment to this style, to how they build their team, and I would say it's, not to use a corporate buzzword, the most synergistic operation in the NFL, and it paid off with a championship.
Well, you didn't miss the corporate buzzword, but I would agree that this is the franchise that, if you're looking in terms of all the parts working together and that cooperation, which is indeed synergy or professional synergy, this is the organization that everybody in the NFL is chasing right now, because they are firing on all cylinders. And what you get is what you got last year, which is a dominant team. Again, the timing is serendipitous here. We did not plan to have the most powerful team in the NFL by power score as the last team, but that's the way the schedule worked out. It's just how the football gods wanted it. And that's the result you get when everybody pulls together in the same direction strongly and is good at their job. Like, I'm not saying other organizations don't all want it the same, but they can't execute it the same way that the Birds do right now. It's just not easy to do.
And I understand that it feels like there's nowhere to go but down if you're the number one team in the NFL, which, make no mistake about it, they are. I still get shit from Eagles fans, by the way, because I had like a kind of a tongue-in-cheek tweet early on in the year where I was like, they're like 2-2. They're looking shaky. Just wait. They're gonna have an embarrassing, loss to the Giants coming up here. Good. And I wasn't saying they're a bad team. It was more just me trolling Eagles fans, and I still hear about it, as I should. Like, if you win the Super Bowl, you get to throw it back in everybody's face. But I know a lot of Eagles fans are now thinking like there's nowhere to go but down. Like, we're on top. We're the number one team in most things. We can't possibly get better. We can only get worse. And to that, I would say you actually can. Like, there actually is, believe it or not, room for improvement here significantly. And they were a 14-win team that cruised their way to a championship. So a lot of today's show is actually me saying that, okay, the weaknesses exist, but they could be an even better team this year if they just shore up those couple weaknesses, which sounds terrifying because it is. But first things first, we'll go through 2024. We'll recap everything good that happened, and then we'll kind of talk about those areas of improvement. And at that point, I don't know if anybody's beating them if they fix that.
Probably not. One more victory lap for you Philadelphia fans. You deserve it. Your team was amazing. 14-3 last year. First in the division. 8-1 at home. 6-2 on the road. A dominant record there. Last 5 games, 4-1. It's hard to count them as a surge team because, like you said, that role started in the first month of the season and just kept going all the way through the Super Bowl. Now, I talked about power score earlier. This is a sterling reflection of a football team that knew what the hell it was doing. We take running offense, passing offense, the ability to stop the run, stop the pass, score points, and keep points from being scored against you. For the first 4, we use EPA. We just assign their league ranks. Every single rank is in the single digits. Every single rank is in the top 10. Most of them are in the top 5. This was a team with very few weak areas. Passing offense, 8th. That's the lowest number I'm going to read. Rushing offense, 1st. Pass defense, 4th. Rush defense, 2nd. Points scored, 7th. Points allowed, 2nd best scoring defense in the NFL. Unsurprisingly, when you add all those numbers up, divide by 6, you get the 1st overall power score in the NFL. And this is one of the reasons that we like power score. Power score works, for lack of a better term. If you're looking at the team that absolutely ravaged most of the NFL and won the title, they ended up with the best power score. Doesn't always happen that way, but by and large, teams with good power scores are good football teams and vice versa. That's why we like it.
So I'm sure the Eagles fans at home then are asking, like, how do you possibly get better than that? And I look right at that passing offense, number 8. I think this could very easily be a 3 or a 4 next season, as long as one thing in particular improves. Or rather, 2 things. It's just more of a 1A, 1B. This team did not handle pressure very well. And I would say Herz did not handle pressure very well as an individual, and as a team, they did not handle blitzes very well. And this has been a problem going back a couple years, all right? Even going back to the year where they fell apart in the second half of the season. Obviously different coordinators and everything like that, but largely the same personnel fell apart in the second half of the season because they didn't have any answers for the blitz. And we saw that creep up again last year. It's just they were so good at everything else. Like their defense was incredible. They were able to really run the ball. It kind of masked that issue. And so I'll start with what they can get better at first, and that is pass blocking, for one, which sounds insane, by the way, because it's like, what are you talking about? They have Lane Johnson, they have Jordan Mailata, they have Dickerson, like they got Juergens, they got Steen. Like how do you get better at pass blocking? Well, believe it or not, if you go over to our handy dandy companion infographic, and we have one of these for every single team. It's like between 17 and 19 pages for every single team. One of the pages we have is trench efficiency, which is where we have 4 key stats that measure how good your offensive line is and how good your defensive line is. And defensive line, we have average yards before contact per attempt allowed, as well as pressure rate generated. This team was 6th in pressure rate generated, and they were 10th in average yards before contact per attempt allowed. Really strong defensive line. Offensive line, really skewed, believe it or not. They were 2nd in average yards before contact per attempt generated at 1.9, meaning, yes, Saquon did a lot on his own, but he went basically 2 yards past the line of scrimmage on average before even getting touched. They were incredible at run blocking, but in terms of pressure rate allowed, pass blocking, they were 21st in terms of pressure rate allowed on average. And it's interesting how you kind of look at the individual linemen on this team: Mailata, Lane, Dickerson, Juergens, Steen. They had a couple fill-ins here and there due to injuries, but generally speaking, in a vacuum, they were all good individually. But if you're looking at how they handled stunts as a unit and how they handled blitzes as a unit, they were not very good at it, which is why they were 21st in pressure rate allowed. They were 9th worst overall in terms of pressure rate allowed on stunts at about 46%. And if you're looking at how often they faced blitzes, like they were one of the teams that faced more blitzes than almost everybody else. Ninth highest blitz percentage faced. On passing plays in particular, they were fourth highest in terms of blitz rate faced. They were third highest in sack percentage allowed, only behind Cleveland and Chicago. I know the total number of sacks they allowed wasn't that high, but if you're looking at percentage of pass plays where a sack was allowed, they were way up there. So it wasn't about people were beating Lane individually or Mailata individually. It was that, DCs were really able to scheme up pressure against this team. And you saw that a lot in the first, 4 to 5 weeks or so when they were getting the speed wobbles early on at the gate, where I was being cheeky about it. But they adjusted by basically just saying, we're not going to throw that much. We're just going to run the ball. Like, we're going to lean into what we're really good at, which is run blocking and Saquon being Saquon. And if Hertz needs to make a few plays here and there for us to convert on a key third down, which he was very good at last year. If we get into fourth and short, we'll push our way to victory. But like, they realized very quickly like what they were good at, and they just leaned into it. But that doesn't mean that weakness isn't still there. They have to get better at handling stunts. They have to get better at handling blitzes, or unfortunately, they're going to run into a couple teams in the NFC in the playoffs that are really good at doing stunts and blitzes, i.e. Minnesota, Detroit, honestly, basically the entire NFC North. Like, it could be a problem that pops up for them again. They have to address it.
And like any good team, if they don't, they're going to see it until they do. That's the thing about the NFL. So Philadelphia just sort of flipped the script and said, yeah, we know that's what you're going to do to us, so we're just going to give you like 10 chances a game to do that instead of 20 or 30. We're just not going to show you our weakness. We're going to basically camouflage it with the strength and bulldoze you into oblivion because we're really good at that. And that'll probably win us the game. And again, when you combine it with that complementary approach, a defense that was incredibly stingy in giving up points, ball control, keep the other team off the field, take the time possession away, then turn them over to that defense and be like, yep, good luck. We might have only scored 17, but we don't think you're going to score 12. So let's go.
And then individually, Hertz also, when he does get pressured, he has to handle that better as well. And it's kind of interesting how the best I've ever seen him handle pressure in the backfield is in his 2 Super Bowls that he's played in. Like, I thought he performed better against Steve Spagnuolo blitzes in the Super Bowl than even Tom Brady did. And I've talked about it several times, but I did a piece with the NFL about how Spags was throwing the exact same blitzes at Hertz in the Super Bowl that he threw against Brady when he was the Giants DC in that, the 18-1 year where the Giants upset them. He was throwing the same blitzes at Hertz, and Hertz handled it way better because he's more mobile, and he was able to beat the free runners and make throws off platform and everything like that. But if you're looking at the rest of the year, oddly enough, and I don't know why, but oddly enough, he was not as good under pressure as he is in his biggest moments, which I guess I'd rather him be the best in the biggest moments.
I was going to say, yeah, if you want to have it one way, that's the way you want to have it.
If you want to have it one way. Right. Yeah. Like it matters, but also at the same time, you're like, but why?
Right.
And I have a couple numbers to back that up. So, like I said, 21st in pressure rate allowed up front. When Hertz was under pressure, he had a 68.6 passer rating that was 14th in the NFL. He had a 4.8 yards per attempt that was 32nd among starting quarterbacks in the NFL. Not ideal. However, when he was kept clean, and this is why I'm a big Jalen Hurts fan. Again, I don't have him as a top 5 quarterback, but the reason why I like Jalen Hurts a lot, and I do think he is one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL, is because when he was kept clean, he was an assassin, right? 115.5 passer rating with no pressure. That was 3rd, even ahead of Josh Allen and Joe Burrow last year, believe it or not. 9.2 yards per attempt with no pressure, tied for 3rd with Jared Goff. So I know it sounds odd to say that Jalen Hurts and Jared Goff are similar quarterbacks, but in the sense of under pressure versus not under pressure, like it's pretty close here. So I think he gets people misunderstand Hurts almost on purpose because they still remember Bama Jalen Hurts, but like if he is kept clean, that dude is a jugs machine. You just got to keep him clean.
And again, when the brightest lights come on, he somehow elevates and gives you the performance that you would hope he gives you all the time. But if the rest of the team is built to carry him to that point, it's kind of like having a shaky starter health-wise in baseball. I'm not saying Jalen Hurts is injury prone. He's not, but it's like, man, we just got to hide this guy until we get to the playoffs, because if we put him on the mound in the playoffs, he's going to throw strikes. And that's Jalen Hurts for the Eagles. And yep, he needs to get better at handling the pressure. It's funny how often sacks are misunderstood. And as a Chicago fan, I get this. How often when there are a tremendous historic amount of sacks, everybody goes, well, the offensive line sucked. Well, for some of it, sure, but the quarterback also has responsibility on many of those. And as a show that tries to bring nuance to you and help you understand the NFL game in a deeper way, it's not always on the offensive line. And so they both need to get better. The offensive line has some responsibility on those stunts and twists. Again, 5 very talented individuals, but just like any other offensive line, they have to play together and understand. And if they don't, there'll be breakdowns. And when that happens, Jalen Hurts has to play better as well.
Touching on the run game a little bit here, it's a lot of what we said year after year after year in the Jalen Hurts era when we do these Eagles episodes, which is they line up in shotgun the vast majority of the time. They run inside zone the vast majority of the time. They were 4th overall in inside zone rate at 31.2%. They were 28th in outside zone rate at 19.1%. Believe it or not, that's actually more outside zone and less inside zone than they've run in the past. They got a little bit more balance, but again, we're talking about 28th and 4th, not 32nd and 1st. So, I guess that's the Kellen Moore effect to a degree. And then also just interesting fun fact, for the second year in a row, this team ran a higher percentage of quarterback sneaks than they ran power runs all year. It was 4.5% quarterback sneaks, which by the way is a shitload by NFL standards. And power, they're 3.2%. So they do what they do, and they're very good at it. I also partially think the reason why this offensive line is so good at run blocking is because they kind of keep it simple, and they're just really good at mastering, the same 2 main concepts, which are inside zone and counter, over and over and over again. And, they basically know how to run it against every single front, every single technique, like whatever look you present to them, they're all in sync in terms of how to execute those particular runs. And they don't really leave their comfort zone because they don't have to.
Yeah, older Eagles fans will want to close their ears for this because I am going to compare you to a division rival, but it reminds me a little bit of the Hogs in Washington. They were so dominant running counter tray under Gibbs that they basically ran it until you could stop it. And if you couldn't stop it, they just ran it. And they were incredibly good at it. Obviously, Riggins was a very different back than Saquon. I'm not comparing those two. But in terms of, we have a concept that works with our personnel, our execution. We are so good at running it. We're going to run it until you can try and run us out of it. And very few people could. And it's the same with the Eagles.
Now, flipping it over to the defensive side of the ball, this was in many ways the actual catalyst for the run they went on, because they did give the offense a little bit more grace, right? Or a little bit more margin for error. I think that's the better way to put it. In the year before, where they fell apart because the offense was having the same issues as last year. It's just they didn't have a defense that could kind of cover it up and give them more manageable field position, or just generate turnovers, or just keep the score low. They took pressure off the offense, so the offense could just run and run and run and run and run. So, looking at this defense, which is a very young defense, full of guys on their rookie deals. That's also why they're so cheap. Just looking at the starters, right? You got Cooper DeJean on a rookie deal, Quinyon Mitchell. You got Sidney Brown. Zach Bond is not on a rookie deal, but he was dirt cheap last year, so I'll include it. He just got extended, obviously, but he was formerly really cheap. Nolan Smith is on a rookie deal. Jalen Carter's on a rookie deal. Jordan Davis is on a rookie deal. Moro Ajoma's on a rookie deal. Like, the entire defensive line is extraordinarily cheap. And if you're looking at cap allocation for the defensive line unit, this is the 28th most expensive interior line trio in the entire NFL. Only $16.4 million combined cap hit for that entire group. and you've got at least two guys who I think are going to be Pro Bowl caliber. Obviously Jalen Carter, but Moro Ojomo is a sleeper in my opinion to be, the next Milton Williams type. And if you can get that much production for that little money, you can kind of afford to have your offense be as expensive as it is. So that to me is the key to everything, is Howie consistently hitting on these defensive draft picks, generally by just saying whoever's good from Georgia come to Philly. It's worked over and over and over again. But like that to me is the key to everything.
That balance of that little money for that much production is obscene. There isn't any other way to say it. That is completely obscene. And when we talk about how important the draft is, because we do that a lot on this channel, this is why. This is how you can game the system. But you have to draft well and you have to develop well. You have to have coaches like Jeff Stoutland that allow you to buy low, both in the draft and free agency, because that's the other piece of this that Howie Roseman has done extremely well is, oh, you have a cast off that you never developed correctly that we liked 3 or 4 years ago when he was in the draft. Sure, give him to us on a dirt cheap contract in free agency as a cast off. And oh, by the way, we're going to turn him into an all-pro. Doesn't always happen. Howie doesn't hit all the time. Listening to us talk about him, you'd think he did. No, but he hits a lot more than his contemporaries, both in the draft and free agency. And that allows this team so much room to maneuver financially, on the field, with the depth chart. It is truly an NFL superpower, and it's why Howie is at the top of the heap. There are a lot of other good GMs in the NFL. Nobody has that blend or balance between those two team building prongs, which are, the pillars of doing it. He has a hit rate that is, it's up there.
And what I really like most about Howie, beyond just, how he and Jeff Lurie spend their money so aggressively and structure these deals, like obviously that in itself is awesome. But as far as the actual talent acquisition, when he misses, or if there is a weakness on his roster, he doesn't just throw one thing at it. Like he will shotgun approach until he fixes that particular issue, right? So like when he missed on the Jalen Reagor pick, he came back, as soon as he possibly could and was like, all right, now we're going to go get Devonta Smith and we're going to trade for AJ Brown. Like we're just going to fix the issue, because I'm not just going to sit here and spend one pick per year hoping to find a guy. It's like, no, we're going to attack this right now. We're going to attack it aggressively. 2023, one of the worst corner situations in the NFL, comes back in 2024. Quinyon Mitchell, through the grace of the football gods, falls to Philly. And he's like, all right, we're going to take Quinyon. Cooper DeJean's there in the second round. They probably weren't even planning on that, but they're like, screw it. He's a top tier nickel. We also need that. We're just going to attack the position. And all of a sudden they built one of the best young secondaries in the NFL. Come back again this year. They thinned out a little bit in March, so we're going to attack it again in April, bringing Andrew Makuba to shore up safety once again. Signing Adoree Jackson. Like he's aggressive, like extremely aggressive. And as soon as he smells his own blood in the water, he attacks, which I can't say the same for a lot of other GMs.
Yeah, and it is that comprehensive approach. He doesn't stop. He doesn't rest on his laurels. He doesn't look at that defensive line group and go, okay, cool, I got it. Like I got it all lined up. He knows what I said at the top of the show. Life comes at you fast in the NFL, and you can't have enough good talent. And typically, this is my strongest argument for my little UDFA soapbox that I jump on all the time. And a lot of people are like, look, most of those guys are throwaways. Only a couple of them are going to make the roster. You would think this team of all teams would be lazy in UDFA. They're like, look, we kill the draft. We've got great coaches. We kill free agency. We're ahead on our contracts. We're not wasting money like our division rivals. Who could possibly make this team? Like, we're so good. We don't need any UDFAs. The other way. We're going to talk about 4 or 5 UDFA names out of a list of 3 times that many that are really have a chance to contribute on this team, whether it's now or down the road. And if they don't contribute on this team, they might contribute on another team as well. They are aggressive in all phases, and he goes after it. Just kill it with fire is the approach, right? I'm going to stamp out that problem, and I'm going to stamp out all the problems, not just one. I'm going to go after every single one I can with every single tool I have available. And what you get is this roster where you're looking at guys in the third and fourth line of the depth chart going, I don't know, I think that guy could have been a starter on another team, and they might not make the Eagles.
One tiny little break here, and then we'll get back to the rest of the show, I promise. But if you're a fantasy football player, and in particular, a really good fantasy football player, then today's sponsor is for you, FFPC. You put in the work every single fantasy season. You listen to the podcasts like this one. You follow the experts. You make your own rankings. You look at my rankings and then scoff at how bad they are. And then you go off your own stuff and you draft and you dominate. Unlike me, I'm actually kind of shockingly bad at this for somebody who covers the sport for a living. But you're pretty good at this. And because you're pretty good at this, it's time to go to the next level. The FFPC is the place to play traditional season-long fantasy football. They don't do salary caps. It's not DFS. All they offer is pure drafting fun that you've loved for years. FFPC is home to not $1 but $2 million grand prizes, and you can draft in the FFPC main event or the Big Gorilla today and win those seven-figure payouts. No matter what your favorite format is, they have best ball, they have dynasty leagues, they have a whole bunch of other exclusive and innovative contest formats. You're going to find it all at FFPC. Drafts are filling every single day at myffpc.com, so check that out below. And if you use promo code BOOTLEG, you're going to get $25 off your first draft. Again, that is myffpc.com, promo code BOOTLEG at the link in the description below, myffpc.com, promo code BOOTLEG. Thank you once again to myffpc.com for sponsoring today's show. And with that, let's get back to it. While we're on the topic of Howie and the power structure, might as well talk about everybody else, right? Because it is a team effort here, not just on the field, but in the front office. I've always had my issues with Nick Sirianni, but I'll tell you what, the man can hire coordinators. I'll give it to him. Like, this is an extremely, extremely strong staff.
He just keeps doing it. That's Nick Sirianni in terms of being able to hire folks that can fix the issues if the issues exist. And it's either one of two things. Either he hires somebody and it doesn't work out and they flame out like they did in that 1 year, or he hires somebody and they work out so well that they get poached and then he has to do it again. So in terms of hiring, he's very good at it. He's in it every year. He's got to replace somebody, it seems like. So Howie, we've given the flowers to. Nick, again, is a lot of people, including you, will take issue with game management, day of decisions, but there is no denying that he can bring people together, both players and coaches, because every team that wins the Super Bowl needs luck, no matter how good your roster is, no matter how good your coaches are. And you need people who are going to respond to adversity well, players and coaches. Nick Sirianni has been able to find them at a very high rate in a very short young career as a head coach, and that is to his credit. So the offensive coordinator is Kevin Patullo. Defensive coordinator, of course, is Vic Fangio. Special teams is Michael Clay. And then the running backs coach / assistant head coach, in that order, is Jamal Singleton, which I think is telling for Philadelphia. Philadelphia feels like one of the few teams that would be like, oh no, running backs first, assistant head coach is second for him. Other notable coaches on offense: Jeff Stoutland is the run game coordinator and offensive line coach, and one of the best coaches in the NFL, period. One of the best talent evaluators and developers. And the reason for that offensive line being able to reload, they don't always spend high picks. Yes, sometimes they do, but when they get great talent, they retain it. And then, the International Pathway Player Program, like, that's where they have their left tackle from. Not a lot of teams can say that. A big part of that is Jeff Stoutland. Parks Frazier is the pass game coordinator. And the reason I want to talk about Parks Frazier is because his journey as a coach is a testament to coaching determination, if nothing else. He started off in 2015 as a defensive quality control coach at Samford. Not Stanford, Samford. Then he went to Middle Tennessee State, also as a defensive quality control coach. Arkansas State, graduate assistant. Not exactly moving up the ladder here. You have to be determined to hang in coaching at almost any level. High school coaches, college coaches, they give up so much to be in the profession. Then he gets a break. Indianapolis Colts. What's the role? Assistant to the head coach.
Not assistant head coach.
Nope. Assistant to the head coach. That's correct. Not regional manager. Yeah. Then, again, staying with the Colts, they identify some talent and they say, okay, cool, we're going to give you an offensive QC role, quality control coach. Again, still bottom of the depth chart in terms of coaching hierarchy. And we're 5 years into his coaching career. He is in the NFL, which is, again, recognizing his ability and rewarding it. But we're 5 years in. He's moved from Sanford to Indianapolis, but he's still an offensive quality control coach. Gets to stay with the Colts for another couple of years. Big promotion, right? Assistant quarterbacks coach. Okay.
Hey, it's moving up in the world. Yeah.
You're a position coach, but you're the assistant quarterbacks coach. Now, Colts, we've been with you 3 years. He gets the interim OC job. This is a huge break for a young coach and really what sets him off on the rest of his path. Now, goes to the Panthers in 2023. He's the passing game coordinator there. Doesn't work out so well. 2023 for the Panthers wasn't a great year. Goes to the Dolphins. Back to being an offensive assistant. It is a roller coaster if you are in coaching. And now, Philadelphia Eagles, 2025, passing game coordinator for the Super Bowl champions. 10 years after being a defensive quality control coach at Samford.
And I'll tell you what, compared to a lot of coaches in the NFL, that is a quick rise.
That's quick. Yep.
That's quick, right?
That's fast.
Because there's a lot of guys that grind and grind and grind, and they're position coaches for 20 years.
And they never make it. And I don't want to say never make it, because making it is a very personal thing. If you're a position coach in Division I and you love it, if you're a linebackers coach at Clemson and you think that's the best thing ever, you've made it. That's the top of your particular mountain. But when we look at coaching journeys, it's always fascinating to me, like where they started, how they took their opportunities, where the steps up were, where the steps back were, how they persisted. Again, that is a very fast rise. That is 10 years from Samford to the basically pass game coordinator for the Super Bowl champions. That's Cinderella stuff in the coaching world, but it's still not easy.
I want to hit on Vic Fangio, who himself has had one of the longest coaching journeys in NFL history, going back 50 years at this point, at least around 50 years. And he's been part of, legendary defenses for half a dozen cities at this point. And what he did with the Eagles' young group last year, I think was one of the best coaching jobs he's ever done. And boy, that is saying a lot. All right, this is the guy who's the linebackers coach. Again, he was a position coach for a while. Linebackers coach for the Dome Patrol Saints, where they had 4 guys, that went to the Pro Bowl that year. He then did it again in San Francisco, had 4 linebackers that all got season accolades. I can't remember if it was all pro or Pro Bowl, but he's the only linebackers coach, or rather the only defensive coach ever to produce 2 different linebacking corps that had 4 guys all get awards in the same year. Obviously was DC with that legendary 2018 Bears defense. And then what he did in Philly, I would put that up against anything he's ever done, because he had an extraordinarily young group full of rookies and second-year players, and he turned them into an absolute buzzsaw. And he did it through, you can either call it aggressive simplicity or simplistic aggression, whatever way you want to phrase it. And that doesn't mean that they blitzed a lot. They really didn't. They were 28th in blitz rate overall. But he didn't overwhelm them with a high volume of calls. Like, they basically just ran the same 3 to 4 things every single snap, just depending on down and distance, which was either quarter, half, or half, quarter. And whether or not you're playing the half field safety to the weak side or the strong side really just depends on wherever the number 1 is lined up, which, we've been over that before in terms of they have one call that could become 3 different calls depending on where their game planned receiver is. They also had a bunch of quarters thrown in there. They were first in quarter, half. They were 5th in quarters. Combined for 37% of all of their calls were just those coverages. And then they were 10th in cover 3 at 41.1%, which for some Eagles fans, that'll perk your ears up, because you're like, wait, I thought Fangio just does 2 high stuff. It's like, yes, he does, but he will run cover 3 from a 2 high look pre-snap, and he's just going to roll one of these 2 safeties down so they get into it post-snap. And that ties into a larger point, which is that cover three actually hasn't gone down across the NFL. It's just everybody runs it like Vic now because Vic runs it really well. Like it, it's still the same percentages, at least similar percentages overall for cover three across the NFL. It's just, that rotation is what's changed a lot. All that to say, they run the same stuff over and over and over again. They line up the same way, and then you just don't know if you're getting quarter, quarter, half, quarter, quarter, true quarters, cover three weak, or cover three strong. It's one of those two things, but they have their rookies and all these young guys stand in the same spot every single snap, and then we're just going to find out post-snap what they're in. But it allows them to be really aggressive. It allows them to play fast. It allows them to play disciplined. And even if they get caught in a bad call, one of the oldest coaching adages is if we're all wrong together, then we're right. The fact that they don't have any busted coverages because they don't call anything crazy exotic is why they were so good, right? So it's a very simple formula, but damn, it was effective.
And once he inserted Cooper DeJean in the lineup and, the combination, you talked about it, going from the cornerback situation the year before, which was, oh my God, this is going to get us killed, to drafting Quinyon Mitchell, hitting on him, having him play solidly from camp onward, and then figuring out Cooper's role and inserting him and watching him take to this defense like a fish to water. At that point, they became, I don't want to say unbeatable because they did get beaten, but they became extremely difficult to beat. And when you're talking about that kind of praise for a couple of very young players in a defense with a coach like Vic, who has been around a long time and doesn't tolerate mistakes as well as a lot of other coaches, that means both of those guys rose to a level very, very quickly and became really the sort of rock that he built the back end of this defense around, no matter what they were calling. That's an incredible testament to those guys' ability to adapt and play well in that system. And as fast as they played, even by midseason, the speed with which they were able to execute this defense was ridiculous. Neither one of them looked like rookies. I would say 6, 8, 10 weeks into their career. Most people are like, oh, the light will come on in a little while. I'm like, it came on a month ago for both of those guys. Are you seeing this? They're playing with their hair on fire. So it's not just Vic Fangio on that staff. Clint Hurt, the big Hurt, got to call him out, senior defensive assistant and defensive line coach. Again, all that talent that you have. Clint Hurt just gets to rub his hands together when he comes to work every day and be like, oh, world's my oyster. I can do pretty much whatever I want with this group. Christian Parker is the defensive pass game coordinator and the defensive backs coach. Jeremiah Washburn, longtime coach. Defensive ends and outside linebackers coach, basically their pass rush coach. And Bobby King is the inside linebacker coach. Again, one of the guys in charge of taking everything Vic wanted to do with Zach Bond and saying, here's what it really means. I know this is a different system. Let's go.
Let's take a detour into free agency now, because there has been a lot of roster turnover here that all these position coaches we just talked about are going to have to deal with. They lost a bunch of good players because anytime you have a roster this loaded, inevitably you're going to lose some people, even though they've done a good job of keeping most of the core together. Like, it's impossible to keep everybody together. But there has been fairly significant talent bleed this offseason. Bryce Huff, I wouldn't really consider Bryce Huff the critical talent bleed, but still played a bunch of snaps for them, little under 30% of their snaps last year. He's now a 49er. Kenny Pickett was their backup. He is now a Brown, and maybe he'll still be a Brown in a week. I guess we'll see. Josh Sweat, obviously this is the one that hurts the most, or at least one of the ones that hurts the most on this defensive line. He is now a Cardinal. He got the bag there at a little over $19 million. Mekhi Becton was a very effective right guard for them last year. He is now a Charger. He's going to be their starting right guard, assuming he stays healthy. Milton Williams, he was the other biggie besides Josh Sweat. He is now a Patriot, got $26 million. Was one of the most effective pieces on that entire defense for them last year. I assume he's going to be the same in New England. Really, really good defensive tackle. They're hoping Moro Ajomo can step up and replace him this year. Avonte Maddox is now a Lion. Thomas Booker, just recently, bootleg favorite Thomas Booker, recently got traded to the Raiders. Kenneth Gainwell, he is now a Steeler. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson is now a Texan. He did get hurt recently. Last time I saw a report on it, it wasn't as serious as they originally feared. I'm going to double check to see what the actual prognosis was, but either way, he's trying to get back healthy right now in Houston. And then Isaiah Rodgers, who has been an effective corner in the past, played about a third of their snaps last year. He is now a Viking. So that's a lot, EJ. And not all of them were like critical pieces, but a couple of them were. And as much as we like, some of the young guys they got coming up to replace them, it's going to be tough to replace them.
And when you have that balance that you talked about in your salary cap between offense and defense, right now, much more of the money is on the offensive side of the ball. And when you have defensive starters that you are leaning on pretty heavily, you can't just pay them all. There's not enough money to pay everybody on the team. So you have to lean heavily on that draft and develop stance and say, we have guys, and the Eagles do have guys that they believe are going to step into these roles and play very effectively at lower salaries. And you just kind of have to grin and nod. And in Howie's case, know you're going to get compensatory picks because you're letting all this talent walk, and say, hey, we've got young guys prepared, ready in the wings. Coaches have them prepped to take over these prominent roles. We're going to, again, keep our salary on that side of the ball low, and we're going to get all these compensatory picks, which we're going to talk about when we get to the draft, which is a key component for Philadelphia to refill the cupboard. So it's kind of like my mom used to tell me, pour brave when you had a very full cup and you were trying to pour it into it. Like, the whole thing has to work. You have to commit. You have to say, okay, we're going to let these guys go, but that means the other two things are going to work. Our coaches already have the sort of mid-level guys that we acquired a year or two ago ready to go, and I'm going to refill the coffer on the back end. If all those sort of component pieces don't work, it's like the little recycling diagram, it breaks. And the Eagles have been able to keep that flow going and keep this roster well stocked.
Looking at their in-house retentions now, all the money they spend to actually keep their core together. Lane Johnson got essentially a raise up to $25 million a year. Saquon Barkley, again, essentially got a raise up to 20.6 a year. They both got what amounts to a Super Bowl bump, right? Of like, hey, you brought us a championship, here's more money. Dallas Goedert reworked his deal. He is a free agent after this year. He's making $10 million in AAV this year, and then he's probably going to hit the open market as, I think he'll be 31 next offseason. So I don't know if he's long for Philadelphia. He's another one of these guys that has like void years on void years on void years on the back. So I'll have to look up the exact cap hit. Actually, I have that right here. Yeah, fucking A. 4 void years on the back after 2025. That's a significant cap hit. I'm actually curious how they're going to address that next offseason, but I guess we'll get to that in March. Zach Bond just got a big contract at $17 million, well deserved. Was used, or rather, I should say, was miscast in New Orleans. They were not using him properly. Got to Philadelphia. Vic Fangio worked him out for like half hour. Immediately was like, oh, you're an inside linebacker. Spent his first year as a pro full time at inside linebacker, getting starter snaps, and was immediately one of the best in the NFL. So happy that worked out for him. 29 years young, eventually got his big break in the NFL and got paid handsomely for it. Cam Jurgens, who was the heir apparent to Jason Kelce in the back couple years of Jason's career, he then took over, picked up right where Jason left off, had a really strong year at center. He got extended also at $17 million a year, well deserved by him. And then as far as outside additions, which this team doesn't spend a whole lot on third-party additions because they're just already so good. They would rather spend their money in-house. But they did bring in Matt Pryor, the guard from the Bears, played most of their snaps last year in Chicago. He's going to be a depth piece for them, about 1.3, 1.4 million. Josh Uche didn't really work out in Kansas City, was an effective edge rusher in New England, so we'll see if he can rebound there. A little under 2 million for him to be a rotational edge rusher. Azeez Ojulari, same thing, never really became what Giants fans hoped he would be in New York. Signed him to be a depth piece at 3 million. Patrick Johnson, again, depth piece, another depth edge signed at 1.2 million. Jacorian Bennett, he came back in the trade for Thomas Booker. And that's a really sneaky acquisition. He's a good player. I think he's going to get a bunch of snaps for them this year. Would not be surprised if he played 40% of the snaps for the Raiders last year. Wouldn't be surprised if he tops 50 for the Eagles. He's a very solid player. Also cost them nothing. So really good trade by Howie. Took advantage of the Raiders' desperate need for a down eater at defensive tackle, which Thomas Booker is, really solid player, and basically said, "Hey, we got a guy, but you got to give us something back." And they got Ja'Cory Bennett. And then Kenyon Green, cast off from Houston, never turned into what they hoped it would be. And they're hoping that Stoutland can kind of resurrect his career and do the same thing for Kenyon Green that he did for Mekhi Becton. So we'll see on that. But again, a lot of low dollar amount investments, but some fairly significant ones to boot.
This is Howie's fingerprints are all over this top to bottom, and it's so smart. And by smart, I mean he's giving himself multiple bites at the apple. If I say you've got two potential pass rushers who both, have a lot of physical potential. In Uche's case, he actually delivered on it. In Ojulari's case, he never did, but it didn't go away. He gets two bites at the pass rusher apple for $5 million total. Like, if neither one of them work out, that's fine. Teams spend more than $5 million on a bad contract for a top edge rusher that doesn't work out. Howie gets two shots at recycled guys for $5 million. The guard market has exploded. Kenyon Green didn't work out, was a very talented guard prospect, and he says, I've got a Jeff Stoutland in my pocket. He gets him for under $4 million. If you look at what guards got paid in free agency, top guards, which he may well become under Jeff Stoutland, it's just another swing. If it doesn't cripple him. And then a guy like Matt Pryor, everybody goes, oh, well, the Bears line sucked last year. Matt Pryor played surprisingly solid football from like week 10 on for the Bears. He was one of those guys that, again, your pro scouts have to be digging through film that nobody really wants to watch. Everybody does in the NFL, but they have to have the eye for, this guy's playing really well in what is an overall shitstorm. He comes available 1.3. Like Matt Pryor, you could say what you want about him. In the current inside offensive line market, is worth well more than 1.3. When you have this coaching staff, when you have this cycle and you've done it and you've hit it year after year, there's this weird confirmation bias. People look at guys like Cam Jurgens that got re-signed and they go, oh, Cam Jurgens was always going to be good. If Cam Jurgens went to a lot of other teams, he probably wouldn't have got a second deal, because he gets to play behind Jason, gets to work with Jeff Stoutland, doesn't have to play right away. Yeah, he works out, and he's a very solid piece of that, Philadelphia offensive line. He's incredibly physically talented. That was never a question. And they re-sign him to a big deal. Everybody goes, oh yeah, that was always going to happen. No, it wasn't. It's going to happen because he went to Philadelphia. It wouldn't have necessarily happened at other franchises, and that's why the Eagles are the Eagles.
Getting to the draft now, very, very big class for Philly, which I think also shows how good Howie is at this, because if you're going to be spending all this money on top flight stars, you have to have a bunch of depth that is cheap behind them so you can still fill out the roster. And if you're looking at total number of picks, they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 total picks. Let's see. 8 of them were day 3. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And also 8 of them were not their original picks. So they were moving all up and down the draft board. They were collecting as many day 3s as they could to get as many contributors as they could to fill out this roster because of how they spend.
It's a crazy draft. It is a very Howie draft. And again, one you touched on at the top, 1 round 1 pick, 1 round 2 pick, which was their only day 2 pick. All the rest of the picks here are on day 3. 1/4, 3/5, 4/6. And here's the and to that statement. There's not one player in this class I don't like. Now, if you follow the channel, if you watched all of the draft class recaps, we've now done it for every team in the NFL. There's not another team I can say that for. There's not another team that can say every single one of these players I liked and I can see the fit. And again, because I like the 2 players at the top that were the only day 1 and 2 picks, I can't even say, oh, it was a little early for me, because it starts basically in round 5. And the bulk of this draft is round 5 and 6. And when you look at the talent that Howie pulled out of round 5 and 6, this is masterclass stuff, folks. It's ridiculous. So round 1, pick number 31, pick they got from the Chiefs, Jihad Campbell, linebacker from Alabama, who is a lot like Zach Bond when you think about it in terms of physical profile. He can rush. He is an attacking linebacker. He's got good size. There were some health concerns, which is why he was available down at the end of the first round as opposed to in the middle, but he was my inside linebacker 1 because he is one of the most versatile and explosive. Certainly was in this draft. The fact that he goes to Philadelphia and now Vic can sort of alternately insert Jihad Campbell and Zach Bond in the same defense, put them both on the edge and make you guess, because they're both athletic enough to go forward and backward at high speed, is going to be a real meat grinder for offenses, because putting Jihad Campbell out in the field doesn't give you a tell like it does with a lot of other inside linebacker prospects, where like, oh, if that guy's on the field, they're going to be running this, or he's not going to be doing this. You can't really say that with Jihad Campbell.
I had watched a lot of Jihad Campbell leading into the combine, because obviously he was one of the best players in the combine. And you actually were on him way earlier than I was, because I had started on the other end of the linebacker group. You started at Jihad, and you immediately were like, oh my God, you have to watch Jihad Campbell. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. And like in between Shrine and Combine, I watched Jihad, and I immediately messaged you back of like, yeah, you're right. He's pretty sick. But where I was the most blown away by him was what we saw after his combine day. You know, because he showed up, he had a great normal combine, but then, you know, after his linebacker drills, the coaches had him go do pass rusher drills, and he did a full edge rush workout post combine. And I don't know if it was shown on TV. In fact, I'm pretty sure it wasn't shown on TV, because usually that's the time period where, you know, they're going to the desk, and, you know, DJ and Rich get to have a little bit of a break, and so they're going elsewhere in the building. But I was out there with my camera watching him go through these edge drills, and he was hurt. By the way, he did everything hurt. He was rehabbing from basically everything: hip, knee, shoulder. But watching him go through those drills, clearly gutting it out. Like, I was 10 feet away from this kid. Like, he was wincing after every rep, but he was still pushing through. And he looked phenomenal. And I'm like, that's what you look like when you're hurt? Are you kidding me? Like, he was so fluid, so explosive. Like, he's beating on this bag with his bad shoulder hand, by the way, and it's just popping over and over again. I'm like, God damn, he's got like one arm, and this thing is still just getting crushed. And I immediately right there was like, yeah, that's a top 20 talent in this class. And then, of course, because he's a linebacker and a linebacker with injury flags coming out, he just kept slipping and slipping and slipping. And the story is that the Eagles were like all in. Like, they were trying to trade up for him over and over and over again, and he just kept slipping. And they were paranoid. They're like, oh my God, we're not going to get him. And then he somehow ends up at pick 31, like one pick away. And they're like, screw it, we're going to do a little baby trade with Andy just to make sure we get him. But like, they were targeting him from the beginning. It was basically him and Walter Nolan. Nolan went off the board super early, and then Jihad was their guy. But like, that combine, I will remember those drills for a long, long time, because I've seen a lot of kids do that up close and including a lot of edge rushers up close and personal, do those bag drills and the hoop drill. He looked better than almost anybody I've ever seen do that. And he's not even a full-time edge. So if we're talking about linebackers that you could put off the edge, linebackers that are going to be really effective blitzers, linebackers that we also think can cover really well, you know, he's sideline to sideline. Like, this is a freaky, I don't want to use the term generational, but rare athletic talent at linebacker. And he's just tough as shit too. So I love the pick. You know, I don't like to use the cliche Howie did it again, but Howie kind of did it again.
You always have those opportunities at the back end of the first round, and we've seen teams that have had prolonged success in the NFL, like I talked about at the top of the show, who get really good at hitting draft picks between 25 and 32. because they let the board come to them. The Ravens did it for years. The Ravens always had low picks, and every year we'd say, oh, they just waited. They let the board come to them, and they took the best available player that fits with their system. Jihad Campbell is that for the Eagles this year. In round 2, pick number 64, one of my favorite safeties in the entire draft, Andrew Makuba, the safety from Texas. A little bit undersized, but great range. A true single high if you want to play him in that role, but also so active. And my only concern with him is frame size, and it's already sort of reared its head a couple of times in camp. He's been dinged up and knocked out of camp, so he is going to have to learn. He's going to have to put on a little weight and build some armor throughout his rookie season if he's able to do that, because he's just going to need it to hold up in the NFL. That much is clear. But skill-wise, just so aggressive, rangy, smart. I really like Andrew Makuba. And in this secondary, he's a luxury. He doesn't have to start for them, yet you can bring him in 3 safety looks. What an absolute luxury.
I am fascinated to see how they deploy him and Dene, right? Because Makuba could be a really good nickel. Dene already is a really good nickel. A couple days ago, they started giving Dene some reps outside in camp to see if he could handle that. I'm wondering if they're doing that because they think if Dene can play outside, it gives them another way to get Makuba on the field, right? As like a nickel safety hybrid. Because I don't think right now he's going to play over either Sydney or Reed. I mean, he could, but like if we just want to get our best 5 on the field, and we're looking at Quignon on one side, Dene on the other, like maybe Jacory and Bennett, like they have 6-7 guys here that can all vulture on this thing together. But it's going to be hard to keep Makuba off the field once he gets on it. And part of me wonders if Dene getting reps outside is their way of testing the waters to see if they can do that.
Yeah, if he holds up physically, he will have a role on this defense because he's incredibly instinctive, has great speed, good ball production, really good eyes for the quarterback, whether or not he has his eyes towards the quarterback or is trailing a receiver, can cover all the way down the field because of that speed. The aggression really makes up for his shortcoming in height. Sometimes you see guys who are a little bit slower and a little bit less technique, but look, they're 6'3" and they have long arms. They do it that way. Andrew Makuba does it with absolute just dogged grit, good speed, and really good instincts. Such a fun player to watch on tape. Now we skip into day 3. So we skip round 3. We go to round 4, pick number 111, a pick that was originally the Panthers pick. Ty Robinson, the defensive tackle from Nebraska. I know a lot of folks that didn't like Ty Robinson as much as I did. If you want a penetrating defensive lineman, 3-tech that has very good size and length, Ty Robinson is your guy. I was incredibly high on him. Again, this is about the range. I probably would have taken him at the back end around 3, but again, I think I was the only guy on that island. The fact that he goes to play in Philadelphia with Clint Hurt and this defensive line group, he's going to be the rotational guy that they groom to take over when Moro Ojomo's too expensive, right? When Moro Ojomo has, that's right.
Yep.
He's going to play well for 2 years. He's going to be up for a contract, just like Milton Williams was. They're going to be like, nope, we can't pay that much. Ty Robinson's going to have a year or 2 in the system and is going to be absolutely kicking ass. And all the folks that know ball in Philly will be like, it's okay. We can let Moro go. Ty's ready. And I fully expect that to happen with his skill set because this is a perfect match of player skill set, need along their defensive line. Their coaching staff can develop him. I love his explosion, and his vertical get off as a defensive tackle is great.
Nebraska had a couple DTs coming out in this class, and at the start of the draft process, everybody was kind of grading them similarly, I should say, to each other. Ty Robinson and then Nash Hutmacher, Hutmacher, I believe is how you pronounce it. And the further I got in the process, the more I was like, yeah, no, these aren't close. These are not similar. Like Ty Robinson was the guy. Like watch the Colorado game in particular. He destroyed the Colorado offensive line. Really, really explosive player. I don't think he's super bendy, but I'm not I'm not sure they're drafting him for bendiness and finish. Like if they want bendiness and finish, that's Jalen Carter, that's Nolan Smith. They're drafting him for disruption and just going in a straight line as explosively as humanly possible and just creating a dent in the offensive line that everybody else can clean up from his chaos. I as far as like value, 111 overall is about where I thought he would go, so it's good value here. But as far as role, I think it's perfect because they need another guy who could do that. That's what Moro Jomo does, to your point. Ty Robinson is just another one of those archetypes.
Yeah, it's a hand in glove fit, and you always love to see that in the draft. Now we start with the round 5 picks, and there are 3 of them. The first one being number 145, a pick they got from the Jet. McWilliams, the corner out of Central Florida, incredibly solid player, especially physically, seeing him up close at the combine. Dude is built and plays with that size. Sometimes, again, you see players who have worked very hard on their bodies and don't necessarily know how to use it. McWilliams is a heavy hitter at corner, and I thought sort of flew under the radar with a lot of other corners in this draft. You didn't hear his name very much, to the point where our buddy Jordan Reed, who's the draft analyst at ESPN, put out an all underrated team about a month before the draft. And I thought, hey, that's a great idea. And I put out a tweet and said, hey, I stole this from Jordan, my all underrated team. And McWilliams was my corner on that because I thought, again, the skill he had and the effectiveness, the production on the field didn't measure up to the kind of talk he was getting during the draft. I thought he was being overlooked. Again, who else but the Eagles to add him to the secondary?
I'll be quite honest here. Again, love the draft class overall. This was the one day 3 pick where I was like, it's kind of early for me. I actually, out of every remaining pick that they had, McWilliams was my lowest grade, which is interesting because he was their 4th pick out of 10. But that being said, we're also talking about a 5th rounder. It's just they have so many day 3 guys and all the grades are kind of jumbled up together that I understand everybody's going to see them in different orders than me. But I would say it was a little early for me. I probably would have gone a round or 2 later on McWilliams. 5'10", $190, like super rangy, but he is slight, like very, very slight. Doesn't have a lot of length to him, clearly. Part of me thinks that he might survive best as a post safety, not necessarily being down around the line of scrimmage. I don't think he's particularly good against the run. I want to weaponize that speed and kind of keep him away from contact and more just kind of be that rangy patroller on the back end. But again, a little bit early for me on that one.
Yeah, I'll give you short, but I won't give you slight, especially not the way he's built in the upper body. The second round 5 pick, number 161, a pick they got from your Texans, Smael Mondon, the linebacker from Georgia. We knew that Howie couldn't go through an entire draft without picking a Georgia player, and Smael Mondon is a fascinating sort of hybrid inside-outside, super rangy linebacker that I think has one particular role. And the note that I wrote in his draft write-up that I did was, fits with a limited sprinkle of space overload rushes. He's a decent blitzer, but he can eliminate athletic tight ends. And I think that is his super narrow niche assassin role in the NFL, is when we're playing a team that has either 1 or 2 very good athletic tight ends, and we want to play a little bit more, we'll call it base, but really that's nickel. We need a linebacker that can really cover a big, rangy, fast tight end down the seam. Smael Mondon is going to be our guy. And for a 5th round pick, that might sound like a really limited role, but it is incredibly useful with the proliferation of aerial threat tight ends in the NFL. And Smael Mondon is the counter to that.
He is my annual Adam West pick. And that sounds weird, but allow me to explain. And I think I've touched on this in the past before, but if you remember the old Adam West Batman show, where he just always had the exact right gadget he needed for whatever problem he was facing, right? Like he's battling the Penguin, and he pulls out his literal anti-penguin spray, right? And it was so campy and cheesy because that's just what the show was. But he always had the exact gadget he needed for the one reason he needed it. Smael Mondon, to me, is my Adam West pick for this team because his one job, I wasn't even going towards tight end. I was going towards running back. Like he is the anti-Jahmyr Gibbs spray for this defense. He's 225, ultra explosive, nearly an 11-foot broad, by the way. Like, he jumps out the gym really fast. Again, not super big, but he plays well in space. Like, he, to me, is we have an issue covering really explosive running backs out of the backfield. And if you're looking at around the NFC, Christian McCaffrey, assuming he's healthy, is in this conference. Jahmyr Gibbs is in this conference. Inevitably, you're going to have to probably face the Chiefs in the Super Bowl at some point in the next couple of years. Again, they got a young kid by the name of Brashard Smith, who's a converted receiver to running back. And guess what his role is going to be? It's abusing linebackers in coverage. Like, if you're going up against a team that has that archetype, this is it. This is how you cover that. And I don't particularly think he's great at anything else. But when you don't have a piece that can do that, you feel it. And I think that's why they brought him in.
I think so too. And I think, again, it's a very good fit. They have one more pick in the 5th round, number 168, and they get Drew Kendall, the center out of Boston College, whose dad, Pete Kendall, the NFL guard. Drew is a very solid player, and I thought overlooked because he wasn't special, but he was incredibly solid. And I kind of feel like if Dylan Fairchild was the apple of Howie's eye and he didn't get him and Drew Kendall was there, he was like, yep, I'm going to take Drew Kendall. He has guard center flexibility. He's incredibly smart, obviously comes from NFL bloodlines, plays with great balance. Again, not a physically imposing player necessarily, but not a guy you see getting beat a whole lot either. And a very, again, low-key, useful, will be cheap for a long time as a 5th rounder who can be brought along in Jeff Stoutland's system. And look, he might not be on the 53 because of the depth of this offensive line. He might be on the practice squad for a year and get called up because of injury. If he does and they have to insert him, Drew Kendall is a very reliable player, both from a role perspective and physically. I think this is a great get.
It's a classic day 3 value at interior offensive line, which day 3, especially like the first half of day 3, always tends to get littered with guys like that, and I don't know why quality interior offensive linemen tend to fall to late day 2, early day 3, but they do. And, it's always a gift. Like, it truly is a gift every time, you get that opportunity to pick a guy who could play either center or guard and be a swing for you. Because we know that statistically speaking, you're not going to have your starting 5 the entire year. You need a guy who can fill in at multiple spots, whether it's left guard, right guard, or center in Kendall's case. And they're worth their weight in gold because there are some teams that don't have that. And when they take on one injury in the interior, they're completely screwed. The whole operation falls apart. So if you get an opportunity to pick a guy who can play multiple spots and be good at multiple spots, you do it. Even if you know they're not going to get snaps. Like, eventually they are. And unfortunately, the snaps that they do get tend to be at the most inconvenient possible time.
Moving on, we get to round 6, pick number 181, originally a Patriots pick, and this is my goddammit moment of the entire draft. Kyle McCord, quarterback from Syracuse. And again, Tanner McKee has been playing the lights out. Yes, he got a finger injury, but he is, clearly the guy they want to be the backup and a talented one who will probably be who everybody in the pro scouting departments of other NFL teams is looking at if they were going to poach somebody from the Eagles. And that lets Howie just stash Kyle McCord to sit and learn, possibly be on the practice squad for, one of the quarterbacks I think was best at all the things you need a quarterback to do in this draft. Is he the most physically gifted? Is he the tallest? Is he the fastest? No. Does he have some YOLO moments? Absolutely. But those kind of things can be dialed out of a quarterback. The kind of aggression and accuracy and understanding of how to run an offense can't often be dialed in. And Kyle McCord has those things. This is a crazy value. Round 6, 181 in what I thought was not the best quarterback draft, to put it lightly. Kyle McCord just hangs around, and Howie's finally like, well, sure, if you're just going to give him to me in round 6, I'll take him. I got a bunch of round 6 picks. Let's go.
Plus, he's a Jersey kid, right? Grew up in the area. There's a lot of Birds fans in his family. When the moment that he got drafted was really cool. His family was super jacked up about that. So I'm happy for him. Kyle's a great dude. Smart, experienced, like they unfortunately have the greatest backup of all time, apparently, in Tanner McKee. So he's never going to play.
Future preseason Hall of Famer, Tanner McKee.
But if McKee gets moved, which, the Eagles have a history of developing backup quarterbacks and then trading them for a premium. If McKee gets moved, McCord slides in there immediately and is also a quality backup. So I could see it.
And could be a trigger man on an offense that is this well paid, this talented. He doesn't have to do everything. And that is the perfect possible situation. He does not have to press as a rookie. Love the fit, love the player. Again, we talked to him on this channel. That interview is there from the Shrine Bowl. Great guy, really good insight to the process. Go check that out if you want to, Philly fans. And again, round 6, he just keeps cleaning up number 191. 10 picks later from the Cardinals. Myles Hinton, tackle from Michigan. Now, I'm going to talk about Myles for a little bit because obviously, if you're in the draft game, you end up watching a lot of Michigan tape. They have many draftable players every year. And Myles Hinton was not on my radar before the combine. And this is a real benefit of being on the field for the combine drills. There's always a couple of guys in each position group that catch my eye and make me go, okay. And in my notes, they get a little C. That is a combine note. Something caught my eye at the combine. As soon as I get home from the combine, I'm going to take 2 or 3 guys from each position, and I'm going to prioritize watching them because maybe I missed something, or maybe I've got a whole stack of guys and I just didn't know where to start, and I saw something from them in Indy. Myles Hinton got my C notation this year because he was incredibly fluid. He's really long as a tackle. Now, not the stoutest guy necessarily, but when you have movement skills and length out of a tackle in a league that prioritizes pass production in terms of pass protection, Myles Hinton was like, huh. So I watched him and didn't have a ton of reps, 278 pass pro reps this year, enough to get a good sample size. But what I saw in those reps was, ooh, he's got a couple flaws, but those are fixable from a physical development standpoint in terms of the raw ability and how he uses it. I think he's really good. And whenever I have that happen, I turn to our buddy Brandon Thorne and I just send him a note and say, hey, have you watched Myles Hinton yet? And he hadn't. And I said, okay, cool. Our agreement, and the agreement I have with most draft analysts, is I'm not going to say anything until you've watched him because I don't want to flavor your opinion, good or bad. So I said, when you watch him, get back to me. Probably a week and a half later, Brandon gets back to me and he goes, here's my report. And I said, cool, here's mine. And we just traded. And about 85% of the stuff we wrote in those reports was the same. And I said, cool, you see him the same way I do, as a very good developmental tackle who needs a little more heft on his frame, but is super smart, uses good angles, has great leverage. Again, this guy started at Stanford, ended up going to Michigan. His dad is NFL alum Chris Hinton. There's a lot here to like, but a lot of people weren't talking about him because, again, limited number of reps and not the biggest physically, but he's got 34-inch arms. Looks like a basketball player in the way that he moves in pass protection. God, give him a couple years under Jeff Stoutland. I know this sounds like a broken record, but they did it again. Jeff Stoutland did it again.
I mean, they love big, long, explosive tackles that don't know what they're doing yet. They love it. Right? Because they treat it like a blank slate. Oh, he doesn't actually have any habits, and that's why he's not effective, is because he doesn't have any habits. Doesn't mean he has bad habits. It means he doesn't have any habits. We can build him with good habits from the ground up. And we know Michigan's strength and conditioning program churns out guys that are ready to be NFL athletes immediately. So it's we know his body's taken care of. We think we can max him out a little bit more, but he's coming into the NFL physically developed enough that we can work on everything else. We don't need to get him into shape. We don't need to, transform his body into what we want it to look like. It's already there. So we could just do the football stuff. And, for pick 191, getting a blank slate with that kind of talent, with that kind of coaching staff, I'm not saying it's guaranteed to work out, but track record is track record at this point. Even if he's a practice squad stash for now, 2-3 years, we could look down the line and be like, oh, that's Lane Johnson's heir apparent that they got for nothing.
Or even a swing tackle if you're talking about 191, and that is all value all the time. They don't stop in round 6, 207, a pick that was originally with the Chiefs. They go get Cameron Williams, the other tackle from Texas in this particular draft, who is a different body type. This is a big dude, not surprisingly, tends to be the type that Texas recruits. And he is a power player, more of a classical right tackle, even though I know that's an old designation that doesn't hold up when there's fearsome pass rushers on both sides. But Cameron Williams is more the traditional, we're going to bully you power player, really good in the run game, has movement and length certainly to work in the pass game, but a very different player physically for Miles Hinton. They don't care. They take all types and make them into good players. So, and again, they don't have to have both of them hit. It's a couple of lottery picks on 6th round players. If either one of them hits, they win.
Of the two, I was less optimistic about Cam than I was about Hinton, mainly just because like watching Hinton move and watching Cam move, I was like, oh, that's two totally different things. But I also understand that Williams coming into the league is more developed technically than Hinton is right now. So, you move down one slider, you move up the other slider. I can't teach Cam Williams to move better than he does. I could teach Hinton to play better than he does. So again, of the two, I probably believe in Hinton more long term. But we talked earlier about Howie, taking the shotgun approach anytime that he smells a weakness or even a potential weakness on the roster, which is tackle depth. So he's like, yeah, we're going to throw a couple things at it, and if one sticks, great, we did our job.
Final pick. This is an absolute dagger from Howie. This is the deep 3 from the logo. Round 6, number 209. Pick from the Chargers. A compensatory selection. Again, part of that formula that Howie has used to build the team. Antoine Powell-Ryland, APR, the edge from Virginia Tech. And I struggled with Anton Powell-Ryland because I watched him early and I was like, man, he's great. And then when I did my full workup on him, I went, the way he wins in college isn't always going to work in the pros because he has some physical limitations. And I thought, I was too high on him, so I moved him down. And then I went back late in the process and went, that son of a gun just wins all the time. Like, there's just some guys that make it work, and APR is the ultimate to me, make it work guy. It shouldn't work with his testing numbers, with his size, everything. It shouldn't work, but it works all the time. His pressure numbers were through the roof. And when we talked to Kyle McCord at the Shrine Bowl and we said, who is a defender that just gave you fits? Nobody wants to say, they got the better of us or they kicked our ass. But he said, who's a guy that you just always, after the, first series or the first quarter, you just always needed to know where they were on the field? And he goes, oh, that guy's here. That was APR from Virginia Tech. Like when we played him, he was, the best they usually give you is he was tough. He was a challenge. He was a handful. He gave us problems. And APR gave everybody problems. And again, if you look at his physical profile, if you look at the sort of most desirable skill set for an edge in the NFL, he doesn't fit most of it. And that's the reason he was available in the 6th round. But at the same time, you just look at the production and you go, man, he just makes it work. And some guys just make it work. That is APR in a nutshell.
There are openings for snaps here, right? Because their starting edge duo this year is Nolan Smith and Jalix Hunt. But after that, like, he's competing for snaps with Josh Uche, who is coming off a down year, maybe. Yeah, no, he was only in KC for a year, I think. But down year in KC, Azeez Ojulari, who again never really turned into what they had hoped for him. Patrick Jones, like, he's competing with those 3 guys to be essentially the third edge in the rotation. And top tier, rather not top tier edges, but most starting edges only get about 60-65% of the snaps unless you're Max Crosby and you're a psychopath, which means you're getting 35 to 40% of snaps available for everybody else. He's competing for those 35 to 40% of the snaps. And I think he's got a good shot, like, truly, of getting them. Is he as explosive as Josh Uche? No. Is he as powerful as Azeez Ojulari, at least young Azeez Ojulari before the injuries mounted up? Not necessarily, but he does play with tremendous effort. I think he times the snap really well. I think he's an effective looper on stunts. Like, there's a lot to like here. And, even though I wasn't as high on APR as other people were just because of physical limitations. Like, it doesn't mean I didn't like the player. And, getting him late on day 3, like really, really late on day 3, to potentially get like 20%, 25% of your snaps in the edge rotation, like we'll take that. Like that's a contributor right there. So as long as he can do that and be effective with that quarter share of snaps, I think it's a good pick.
It's a value, and top to bottom, when you look at this, it is Howie not forcing the draft. Obviously, not packaging all those day 3 picks and trying to move up for one player. He understands. Let me just sit in a draft, and Howie's one of the best at this. Understanding each draft is its own thing, is its own snapshot. And you have to work within it. You can't, for the most part, retroactively get your picks from last year or push them forward to next year. You can do that in a limited sense, but you have your picks in that year in this class. And this class had a very wide middle. And he looked at that and said, I'm fine with having a shit ton of 5th and 6th round picks because there are going to be good players who are available that we see very differently than other teams. And that is going to be a value for us. That is our competitive advantage in this particular draft. Masterful job by him.
As far as notable UDFAs, Holland Pierce, another gigantic developmental tackle prospect. We mean it when we say shotgun approach here. Like they're bringing in 3 of them. Holland Pierce out of Rutgers is just a massive human being. Maxon Hook, the safety out of Toledo. Montrell Johnson, the other running back out of Florida. He had a lot of fans. It's going to be tough for him to crack the final 53, but I think he could practice squad. He's fighting for a job with Shunderick Powell, who's the other UDFA running back they brought in, as well as AJ Dillon, who more than likely is going to be the RB3 on this team. So I don't know if he's going to crack the 53, but he'll probably be on the practice squad. And then Darius Cooper, who almost assuredly is going to make the team as a receiver. EJ, you mentioned that he didn't play any second half snaps at all in the last preseason game, which if you're not playing in the second half of a week 2 preseason game, that means you're on the team.
Yeah, you're just hanging out with Jalen Herz. And man, the New York, New Jersey, Philly Metroplex just loves a receiver from the small school who comes from nowhere. Tarleton State for Darius Cooper. I think about guys like Wayne Corbett back in the day for the Jets. Victor Cruz was a UMass guy. Like, these guys are great camp stories. They come on and they can be contributors. And again, said it earlier in the show, for a team this good, Super Bowl champion, loaded roster, letting guys go for compensatory picks, you'd think they'd be slack in UDFA. And we've got 4 guys here that could play a role. And with Darius Cooper is going to be on the 53. Great work by Howie and his staff.
So that brings us to our final segment on the final episode of the Bootleg Summer Series. Well, second to final episode, technically. We do have our patron-only NFC East division roundup tomorrow over on the Patreon. Might as well plug that now. You can find that at the link in the description below or at the QR code on the screen. We do episodes every single Friday for all these divisions. We've done 7. The 8th is tomorrow. And then during the season, we're going to have a whole bunch of preview episodes for games that go live on the Patreon as well. We're going to have the public game previews, but we're also going to be doing additional ones on the Patreon. So if you're already a patron, make sure to stick around during the season. Bunch of extra content coming for you. But back to the task at hand. We have our 3 questions that we ask and answer every single show. What was the identity before? What do they want their identity to be now? And what is the goal for the season? The identity before? Elite, aggressive, fast, young defense that I don't want to say carried the load, but sure took a lot of load off the offense's plate for once. And you have an offense that I think when they kept their quarterback clean was an effective passing game, but they didn't keep him clean as much as you would expect because they weren't very good at handling stunts and blitzes. And to counteract that weakness, they just decided to lean into their strength, which is running the ball and then running it again and again and again and again. And that's how you end up with Saquon having one of the most ridiculous seasons in NFL history. And, Jalen Hurts, unfortunately, getting disrespected more than he probably should. What do they want their identity to be now? I would venture to say the exact same thing, except being able to handle blitzes better. If they can do that, there is nobody in the league that's going to beat them. Like, literally, like they could run the table. They could go undefeated for the entire year if they learn how to handle pressure. It's the only thing that holds them back. Like, truly the only thing that holds them back. if for the third, maybe fourth year in a row, they struggle against blitzes, they struggle against stunts, they'll probably end up about where they were last year, which is only a 14-win team and only a Super Bowl contender. But again, if they fix that one thing, like this is an immortal, legendary team that will not be beaten the entire year if they stay healthy. So that brings us to the goal. What is the goal for this season? I think it would be unfair to label it as Super Bowl or bust, right? Because they just won the Super Bowl. So you can't say, that they have the same kind of pressure that Baltimore does, that Buffalo does, that even, Detroit does or Minnesota, where everybody's like, all right, you got to shit or get off the pot. Like you got to go win one. They just won one. So I don't necessarily think that if they don't win it this year, you could consider this era of the Eagles as a failure. But there is a unique kind of pressure on this team in the sense that they can go from being remembered as a Super Bowl winner to a dynasty. And that in itself is a very exclusive club. There's a lot of teams that have won the Super Bowl. There's very few that were legitimate dynasties. And to be a dynasty that knocked off the previous dynasty, like if that's how you start your own dynasty is by ending the previous dynasty, i.e. Kansas City, there's an even smaller club that have done that before, right? That have literally taken the reins from another organization at the height of their powers and said, no, we're the ones now. Like you have to go through us. Especially when that organization is led by one of the greatest coaches of all time, one of the best quarterbacks of all time, first ballot Hall of Famers at tight end and DT, and to basically smack them in the mouth in front of 100+ million people and say, no, we're the captain now. And then do it again the next year. That is a very exclusive club. And so there is pressure on the Eagles from that standpoint of, okay, they're already a legendary team, but they could be one of the best teams ever. Like ever. So I understand the pressure there. But I don't want to label it as Super Bowl or bust because I think that's pretty unfair to have that kind of expectation. Like, oh, you have to go win it this year or you fail. It's not that to me. Again, you could use that for Baltimore, you could use that for Buffalo, not for the Eagles. So I would say as long as they don't get bounced in the division round or earlier, it's a successful season. As long as they make it to the conference championship, it's a successful season. And from there, we'll take what we can get. But just don't have an early disappointing exit because that kind of takes dynasty off the table, in my opinion.
I think conference championship is where I aim for this as well, because again, you just won the Super Bowl. The NFL is a single elimination tournament. It is on every given Sunday. You can not play your best game and get bounced. And if that does happen to the Eagles again, once they reach the conference championship, it is very hard to say this is a disappointment, but this is a pressure they put on themselves by building this organization, by stocking the roster the way they have, by winning it last year. And it's a pressure I think that they carry and thrive with, which is, yeah, we expect to be there and give ourselves a chance to win. So am I going to say it's a disappointment or they fell short if they get to the conference championship? No. Am I going to say that if they lose? No, I'm still not going to say it's a disappointment. It's the way the NFL goes. It is a very, very difficult thing to do, to repeat in the NFL. Even that repeating as division champion is tough. Repeating as conference championship is 10 times as tough. Repeating as Super Bowl champ is very, very rare. So is it going to be a disappointment if they lose, getting to the Super Bowl, the final stage, or in the Super Bowl? No, I'm sure it will be to Philly fans. Fully understand that. But as somebody who looks at the entire league, if this team rolls back to the conference championship in a strong form, it's tough for me to say that they didn't accomplish what they wanted to this year, and maybe they just didn't catch a break at the end.
All right. That brings us to the end, everybody. Not the end. Like we have a show next week where we're going to talk about everything that we missed from preseason so far, or rather things we've learned from preseason so far. But it's the end of the summer series, and it's always bittersweet because we spend 2 straight months posting and editing these episodes. You know, we record them for essentially 10 weeks, and we spend our entire summer doing it. You know, we've had tremendous help, you know, this year from all of our editors, Jay, Autumn, and Anthony. We had Hockeys and Banter, you know, putting together the infographics and, you know, finding a lot of the data that we've used for these shows. It was basically a 7-person team working on this for multiple months at this point. And I'm very proud of the work we've done this summer. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I know very few of you have watched every single one of them, but if you did, we appreciate you more than you could possibly understand. You know, to all of our patrons who have funded this series, like we've had a couple sponsorships on the series, but generally kept sponsors out of it because we just wanted the content to speak for itself. And unfortunately, it's expensive to make these shows, and our patrons were the ones that carried us financially through the summer and who will be carrying us financially through the season. So if you are a patron and you help pay for all this, and pay for the production, essentially of the infographics and paid for the editing, we could not thank you more. So hope you guys liked it. We'll be back next week with another show. We'll be back tomorrow on the Patreon with our NFC East wrap up. And here's to a good season. I'm excited for 2025. We're only a couple weeks away from real kickoff for once. And yeah, I'm truly happy. I really am. EJ, you know, I haven't said that in a while. I am truly happy.
Yeah, I am as well. This is a great preparatory series for us. It does get us into every corner of every team and every move they've made, and it is a great time to do it because hope springs eternal for every franchise in the summer. As you know, we tend to focus more on the positive than on the negative on this podcast, so it is the perfect time for us to do a series like this. I just want to thank our patrons first and foremost, but I also want to thank everybody else around the league who I've reached out to. That's beat reporters, people that work in team buildings, trainers, agents, just the entire sort of NFL diaspora, right? Of everybody connected to the league who has contributed directly to this series in giving their insights and who's excelling at camp. We can't be everywhere all at once, and they are our eyes and ears a lot of times, and this series would not be what it is without them. So a huge thanks to them. A huge thanks to you who have all watched it and supported it and pushed it to your friends and kept it from your fantasy team. No, wait, that's not right. We need you to push it to everybody. It is a competitive advantage. I get it. But the more people that can see the content and enjoy it like you all do, the better off this show will be and the more we can bring you. So we're looking forward to a great season with all of you, and it is right around the corner.
All right. We'll see you guys again very, very soon. And until then, later.